This is episode 111, The Single Greatest Mistake. Welcome to Alive by Design. My name is Blake Mallon, and we're here to bring you inspiring people, principles, and practices to help you wake up, move toward your meant to, and feel fully alive. Open your mind and let's dive in. Hey guys, before you listen to the podcast, I just want to drop in and say I appreciate you for being here, and I'm super excited about this new Walk With Me series. These are solo episodes where I take some time in the middle of my morning run through the Santa Monica Mountains to share some inspired ideas and thoughts on my mind and heart. If you want to join me for any of these conversations live, you can catch me many mornings on my Facebook page, facebook.com/blakemallon.page. Walk with me. So I was having a recent conversation with a super talented, young, rising entrepreneur who reached out because some circumstances, situations were getting difficult. He had to make some tough decisions. He knew they were big decisions and was looking for some guidance. And had a conversation, and I ended the conversation with applauding him and commending him, not on the circumstance or powering through or accomplishments or achievements, but on the decision that he came to himself in that moment. And I told him, you just went to a whole new level, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a human being, as a person, as a leader. And I share this story because it reminded me of so many similar conversations with so many individuals I've had over the last 2 decades. And for those of you guys that know my background, I've been an entrepreneur now going on 22 years, crazy. And a lot of that time I've had the privilege of working closely with entrepreneurs and those with a desire to become entrepreneurs. And I'll tell you, there's a consistent pattern. So everybody who is or wants to be an entrepreneur out there, listen carefully. And the pattern is at some point in your journey, you're going to have to come to some difficult circumstances and make some very tough decisions. And those decisions in those moments are what make the difference. And I'll tell you, I've done this long enough and seen enough entrepreneurs go through similar milestones. The data is in, the results are in, the numbers don't lie. I can tell you with 100% certainty and zero doubt, based on experience, with enough perspective, that there's one moment that separates those that make it big, long-term, and those that don't. Would you guys want to know what that moment is? Do you want to know what the differentiator is? It's whether or not, when it comes down to it, you're going to make a big, long-term decision based on a short-term emotion. I'm going to say that again. You might want to write that one down, save it to your principles list. Whether or not you make a big, long-term decision based on a short-term emotion. And whether or not you do, when those moments come, which they will, I tell you, is the great divide, the great separation. And I want to talk about why that is the case, how we all face those situations, what maybe goes through not only our mind, but our heart when we're in there, the mistakes that I've seen so many people make, the traps, emotional traps and how to navigate through. And today's topic is something that's going to be, I know, an important one, because I know it's something that all of us have been through and will continue to go through, because it is inevitable that we as people will be put in situations where our emotions are running high, and we're at a moment of decision that we know in that moment the decision has the potential to be a big decision, something that impacts our long-term trajectory, not only of our business, the long-term trajectory of, in some of those moments, our life. Let me go ahead and take a seat here to chat with y'all. Got the cloud layer in today. And let's talk about some of these emotional traps. So I think you know what I mean by that question. How often have we found ourselves in situations where we, in a moment of emotional charge, right, emotional reaction, make a decision, and that decision in that moment affects something longer term in our life? How many of us are willing to admit we've been in those moments where maybe we made a decision based on an emotion, based on a reaction that later we realized was not the best decision for the direction that we wanted to go on? I think all of us have been there. If you have, you're human, it's okay. And I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we know we're going to be faced with those situations in the future. And I'll tell you guys, after not only being through so many of those moments myself, but again, watching hundreds, literally hundreds of entrepreneurs in those moments, potentially thousands, and I'm being literal with those numbers, and having enough time to see how those decisions play out for that many people, I will tell you, I have never, and I use that word very deliberately, never seen somebody ever in my career make a decision based on an emotion in the short term and have that work out for them the way that they wanted in the long term. I've never seen it. I've never seen an emotional reaction, an emotional response, someone make a decision based on a high emotion at the detriment of the long term ever work out. And yet it's something that I know we all face, and it's something that I know many of us have done. And I want to have this conversation and maybe add a level of awareness to it. So when we go through those situations again, maybe we make a different decision, a more beneficial decision for us, our business, our life. What are the emotional traps? There's a lot, right? I think the reality is we all have emotional triggers inside of us based on our past and our history. And those triggers will affect us in different ways and different levels, depending on our own awareness and own personal growth. I know one of the big emotional traps that gets the best of many of us would be the emotion of scarcity. Scarcity. So many times I watch people make and sacrifice a long-term decision based on a short-term emotion, a short-term trigger of a feeling of scarcity. And yes, the term itself, scarcity, is closely tied in many circumstances to finances, to money, right? Bottom line. How often have we maybe seen people, they get in situations where a fear of not being able to have or provide, right? A fear of financial insecurity or instability creates a scarcity, an emotional charge of scarcity, where all of a sudden that feeling of scarcity creates a knee-jerk reaction, a short-term decision to try to solve an immediate financial problem. A lot of times even being aware in that moment, let alone shortly thereafter, it's not the right long-term decision in that situation. And you guys, don't get me wrong, it's a tough one, right? You know, having the means to provide is essential, right? To survival. There is a bare minimum, right, you need in order to have a roof over your head and, you know, food in your stomach and, you know, everything that you need to kind of sustain a a level of living, if we're really honest with ourselves, that number is probably a lot lower than we think it is. You don't have to be fancy all the time. We can go through periods of life where you can minimize and still get by and still be happy and still grow and still thrive. But so often when we get faced with a little bit of loss or even the threat of loss, this emotional scarcity comes in, makes a situation bigger than it probably is. And so often I watch that emotion get the best of people because of the dollar, the money, the bank account. Either a greed or a fear of losing that hits that scarcity trigger. And you guys, in those situations, there's always other solutions, right? There's always other solutions. Don't misunderstand me, right? Finances are important. Essentials are important. Beyond just a bare minimum, we are designed to thrive, right? Every one of you have the talent, the ability, the potential, the gifts to not just get by, but to reach your potential, to make an impact, to go after your dreams. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to think small. I want you to think big, but I want to flash the warning sign, the signal here that you will go through moments, you probably have and you might again, where you're going to be faced with that scarcity trigger. And there's always other solutions. Creativity is always the answer. There is always other opportunity. When you're in those moments, don't make a decision that's going to sacrifice what you know is your long-term potential based on a short-term circumstance. Don't let an emotional trigger of scarcity take you off a trajectory you're meant to be on to try to put a Band-Aid on the immediate. Another one I see get the best, an emotional trap. Insecurity. And let's be real, all of us, come on, we all have our own insecurities. If you're someone out there that's telling yourself, I have no insecurities, that is your inner dialogue masking your own insecurities. We all have them based on where we grew up, based on the parents that we have, right? That is a part of being human. Embrace your imperfection. We all have insecurities. And those insecurities all create emotional triggers in every single person. I've never met a person that doesn't have them. However, the level of which we allow those triggers to affect our decisions, the level of which we allow those triggers to hijack our emotions, the level of which we allow those triggers to affect our decisions, that is the difference. And when it comes to a moment of insecurity, we got to become aware of what our own insecurities are. Be transparent, not necessarily just others, with ourselves, so that when we're in those situations, you're able to recognize it's being triggered and not let those insecurities hijack our decision-making process and sacrifice our our potential, our life path because of a short-term emotional reaction. The funny thing about the insecurity triggers is it sometimes causes us to make knee-jerk reactions in circumstances that have nothing to do with what the trigger is. Have you guys ever seen somebody in a situation where something happened, someone said something, a person was there, the situation, it was like pressing a button that created an electrical charge of emotion. You knew it hit an insecurity button, and all of a sudden, boom, it was like an explosion of emotion, instant decision in all directions on topics that had nothing to do with what the base insecurity is. Who's been there? Sometimes those individuals don't even know. They start making decisions in different directions, and when you peel back the onion a little bit, dig down deeper a little bit, get to the core a little bit, you realize that the energy, the emotion that was leading to those decisions had nothing to do with what the topic was at all, but that emotional reaction causes people all the time, guys, to make decisions in the short term that sacrifice the long term. Insecurity. Emotional trap. We can probably keep going on this list, scarcities and insecurities. There's probably others coming to your mind that you maybe have been through, that have got the best of you. Maybe you've seen others go through, get the best of them. You could probably list them down below better than I. I'll create a catch-all third emotional trap. Both of these fall into that category, and probably most of what you're thinking fall into this category. And I'll summarize it by saying an emotional trap, guys, usually has to do with a fear. At the core, if we were to categorize, it has to do with a fear response that takes over our emotion, that hijacks our brain, that causes us to make decisions in the short term at the detriment of our long-term potential. And you guys, to make a decision based in fear because of the emotion that you're losing control over never works out in the long term. I've never seen it. I've never seen a fear-based strategy go to the top. I once heard it put that to make decisions based on fear is to ignore faith. Faith would be the opposite energy of fear. And faith means a lot of things to different people. I don't know how you define faith and what faith means to you. If I were to give a definition of what faith means to me, faith is a belief in the unknown positive possibilities. To me, that's faith, right? Believing in something that you can't necessarily see, taste, feel, touch today. Something that is truly unknown, but they're positive possibilities. To me, if I were to say one thing that has helped power me through the highs, the lows, the peaks, the valleys, the greatest of runs, the highest level, right, of entrepreneurship, right, down to the valleys and the challenges and everything in between, I said, I've never lost faith. I've always believed in unknown positive possibilities. I've always believed that tomorrow that can be different than today. I've always believed that things aren't happening to you. Things are happening for you. Things are happening through you. I've always believed sometimes when you think things are falling apart, you realize they're actually falling back together. I've always believed that just because things aren't the way they were doesn't mean they can't be better than they've ever been. I've always believed. You guys, faith is the opposite of fear. And if you have a faith perspective, that you know whatever's happening, whatever you're going through, there's unknown positive possibilities right around the corner. It's the antidote to a fear-based emotional response. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that. But it is the antidote. So guys, these emotional traps are just a few. There's many more, whether it be a scarcity, an insecurity, a fear. These are the things that I've seen in my experience get the best. Emotional traps that allow people to get into such a state where they make poor decisions in the short term to try to create an immediate fix at the detriment of the long term. And I've seen it consistently enough, with enough people, enough times, long enough that I can tell you with certainty it never works. It never works. It never works. You might say, well, how come? Like, never is a powerful word. How come it never works? I think it never works. Number one, when your emotions are running high and you look for a quick fix, you're blinded to the whole picture. When you're making an emotional reaction, you're not looking at the whole board. You're connecting pieces of information, a few dots that aren't really there. You're trying to rationalize or justify, see what you want to see in the short term, ignoring what you know is there in the long term. So you're blinded by the full picture. You're operating on pieces of information. You're forcing puzzles together that aren't meant to fit to try to rationalize a short-term decision, even though deep down you probably know it's not the right one. Beyond being blinded, a lot of times short-term decisions, they contradict our very value system. Your value system. We're all built on a value system. We have different values, but we all have the list that we operate on. We all have the things we value that are important to us. And so often, short-term emotional decisions contradict our own value system. And no matter how you try to rationalize what you say to others, you can't lie to yourself. It's a feeling. You know when you've crossed that line. And if you go a direction that contradicts your own operating system, your own value system, it's not going to work. It's not going to give all of you. You're not going to put the energy into it, the time into it. You're not going to have the frequency, the vibe, right? The passion behind it. And those are the things you need to power through tough situations. Those are the things you need to get to the top of whatever mountain you're climbing. So beyond being blinded and only seeing pieces of information, crossing a value system, guys, never works. And ultimately the outcome, and again, I say this, is it never leads to the results that you hope it does. And I've watched so many talented individuals, so many amazing entrepreneurs that I know we're on the right path, that I know we're on the right trajectory, that I know we're going the right direction, get hit by life, by circumstance, by challenge, and make an immediate emotional decision at the detriment of their long-term potential. And I was so proud of the individual that I was talking to recently because they came to their own conclusion. And the irony was, they danced on the line like so many of us do in those situations of the wrong path. And then ultimately came to their own decision of the right path. And I know with certainty, in that individual's case, it's going to lead to where they're meant to go. And I know with certainty that's true for you. Every one of you listening to this right now, yes, you, when you're in those same circumstances. So my challenge for everybody listening here today is simple, because I know we will be faced with those again, all of us. So is life. When you come to those hard moments, don't make short-term decisions based on emotion that are going to affect your long-term potential. Don't make short-term emotional decisions at the detriment of your long-term potential. Focus on the outcome that you want in the long term, the life that you want in the long term, the people you want to be around in the long term, the impact you want to make in the long term. Start from the end and work backwards. And that'll help you make the right moves at the right moments, even when those moments get challenging. I'll give you one more view from the top. I hope for all of us that we don't get faced with the challenges and the tough moments, but the reality is I know all of us will. And I hope this conversation creates a level of consciousness, a level of awareness to help you power through and make the right decisions for the long term, no matter what gets thrown your way. And until the next time, I challenge you in those moments to make the right decisions for you and your family and your business. And I hope this little bit of conversation might nudge you in that direction. Hope all of you have an amazing day. Stay safe. And until the next time we walk together, take care, everybody. Hey guys, one last thing. I'm super excited that this new podcast, Alive by Design, just went live. You see, I designed the show to bring you inspired thoughts and fascinating conversations with the world's most impactful people, to provide transformative principles and practices to help you wake up, move toward your meant to, and feel fully alive. And I'd love for you to help me spread the word now. Simply subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on this platform right now. So if I've ever given you value, please do me this personal favor and go subscribe now. And if you found today's episode helpful in any way, make sure you share this with at least one friend today. You have the power right now to change someone's day. So send them a text message with a link to alivebydesign.com, or simply copy and paste the link right from this podcast platform. Who's one person you know right now that you want to see succeed, that you want to see grow, that you want to see feel more alive? Shoot them a text with your largest takeaway from today and be a light in their day. And if you were referred here by a friend, make sure you shoot them a text back and say thank you. I'd love to hear from you directly on what you got from today's podcast. So if you're up for it, drop by my Instagram @BlakeMallon and shoot me a DM. And as always, thank you for showing up. I'm grateful for you, and I hope our time together today in some small way helped you feel a little more alive. Until next time.